Rachel and I are sitting with the morning crowd at Smoky Row, really cool coffee shop in Des Moines, Iowa. Good morning, everyone. We are here because in the state of Iowa, it is caucus day.
Every time that my party has earned the White House in the last 50 years, it has been with a candidate who is new to national politics.
There is no time for on-the-job training.
I'm running a campaign based on a lifetime of fighting for working people.
We are taking on the entire political establishment, both the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment.
Voices of some of the contenders in the Democratic primary. It is really starting now tonight. The Iowa caucuses are the first contest in the 2020 election. Not much suspense on the Republican side, but a slew of Democratic candidates hoping to take on President Trump in November. Tonight, Iowa caucus goers gather in schools, gyms, churches. They're going to talk, debate, and settle on their picks. One question here and elsewhere: will Democratic voters favor a candidate from the party's progressive wing or someone more moderate?
Well, NPR's Scott Detrow is here with us at Smoky Row. He's been driving all over Iowa, chasing candidates, talking to lots of people. Hi there, Scott.
Hey.
Okay, the last few days, what have you been hearing?
You know, I made my way around the state seeing all the top polling candidates, and one thing that was really striking to me is that hardly anyone was talking about the other Democrats in the race. It's been an unusually friendly race so far between the Democrats, and I think that also underscores that for the candidates, for so many voters and caucus goers, this is a contest all about defeating President Trump. So Joe Biden spends about a half hour talking about Trump's decisions, his character, his fears for the soul of the nation, as he puts it, before he pivots to what he would do as president. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are very different. They talk a lot about the big plans they have for their presidency: increasing taxes on the ultra-wealthy, making education more affordable, pivoting to single-payer health care, things like that. It was notable, Pete Buttigieg is the only candidate making contrast to other Democrats in his closing argument. Not really attacks. He did it in a respectful, thoughtful way, but he's telling Iowans Joe Biden really wants to just kind of hit reset and go back to how things were before. Bernie Sanders really wants a revolution, and Buttigieg is saying there's a big middle ground in between the two of those, and that's what he's trying to occupy.
Interesting.
How many people really at this point haven't made up their minds? Did you get a sense of that?
So many people. So many people. This has been the theme of this year, this contest in Iowa and elsewhere. My colleague Danielle Kurtzleben calls it analysis paralysis, and I think it's the perfect way to put it, because so many voters are dwelling on how do we defeat President Trump, and they don't know what metric to measure it by. And this constant theme of talking to people is, I want to get this right. I want to back the candidate who can win. I want to make the right choice. So I saw people this weekend leaving events. When you leave an event, the campaign says, hey, have you decided? Can you commit to caucus? And people were saying, oh, I've got a few more stops to make. I'm still shopping.
I'm still shopping
trying
out there.
to check.
Get back to me.
Yeah, so I mean, that really underscores we could see a whole range of outcomes tonight.
Well, I mean, it's such an Iowa thing, too. You can go into the room tonight and kind of get a sense for what your neighbors and people in your community are thinking and saying and how they're articulating a message. Just remind us, this is not voting. This is caucusing. How does this work?
It is very different. Yeah, everyone is in the same room. Campaign surrogates make their pitch, and then people sort themselves into group, backing the candidate they want. Now, the rules changed a little bit this year, and that's going to be important. So once that happens, if at your location your candidate does not hit that viability threshold of 15%, then you need to pick a new candidate. It's an 11-person field, and even though all 11 are not seriously contesting Iowa, this is going to come into play. This is what's new. It'll only go 2 rounds, and for the first time when the results come out, we are going to learn the vote totals of the first round, which means there could be a scenario where one candidate gets the most votes in the first round, and after that real allocation, somebody else ends up with the most support and the most delegates. And you'll have 2 candidates saying, I won the Iowa caucuses, but here's what matters. The delegates is what gets you the nomination, and that is what matters, and that's what we're going to focus on when we get results.
Anything in particular you're going to be looking for tonight?
I think that indecision on how it plays out. We talked about the 4 candidates. Amy Klobuchar has been gaining support. Andrew Yang has really carved out a unique space for himself. They could be factors too. There's a lot of outcomes that could come, and you know what? It's exciting to have a real result to look at after a year of wondering what it would be.
Finally.
Okay, Scott Detrow for us. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it.
Sure thing.
All right, so a lot happening here in Iowa we're going to be covering. We also have other important stories that we are covering, and that includes the dangerous coronavirus. That outbreak is getting more widespread in the world. Authorities in the state of California yesterday confirmed 3 more cases. That means there are now 11 confirmed cases in the United States, including 2 confirmed instances of person-to-person transmission.
The Department of Homeland Security put travel restrictions on all U.S.-bound passengers who've been to China in the last 14 days. China reported more than 2,800 new cases, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to more than 17,000 in that country. At least 360 people have died. The Philippines saw its first virus-related death. That is the first death outside of China.
All right, we have NPR health correspondent Rob Stein with the latest here. And Rob, just bring us up to date. I mean, it sounds like this outbreak really is spreading quickly.
Yeah, and as of 5 p.m. last night, Eastern Time, the federal government started banning anyone traveling from China who isn't a U.S. citizen or an immediate family member of an American from entering the United States. And in addition to that, any Americans returning to the U.S. from China's Hubei province, that's the epicenter of the outbreak, are being quarantined for 14 days at military bases around the country. A plane load of people who came back last week are already quarantined in an Air Force base in California. This is the first time in 50 years the federal government is using its quarantine authority, and any U.S. citizens who have been in any other parts of China in the past 2 weeks are being subject to screening at airports and close monitoring for 14 days. And as of early this morning, all flights from China are now being rerouted to 11 airports. So this is all pretty aggressive, unprecedented stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a quarantine is a huge deal, right? I mean, for U.S. health officials to take that step, what are experts saying about that response?
Yeah, so, most of the public health experts I've talked to over the last few days say some of these steps do make sense given how many uncertainties there are about this virus and how dangerous it might be, that, quarantining people who are at high risk of having been exposed to the virus, that might be a smart idea, although they quibble about some of the logistics and how it's being done. But many are really worried about some of these steps, particularly the travel ban, that it might, just go too far and actually be counterproductive. Here's Lawrence Gostin from Georgetown University.
I think that the Trump administration is sliding from complacency and overconfidence to panic and overreaction, to a point where we're going to instill panic and fear in the American public. We have to keep our head here and remain calm.
I mean, panic, fear, what other concerns are there exactly with implementing such a strict travel restriction?
So, critics say historically travel restrictions simply just, haven't worked. That's why the World Health Organization is advising against banning travel. I mean, the critics say that it could actually make it a lot harder to get this thing under control if countries start closing borders. China could stop, cooperating with the rest of the world to get this outbreak under control, and it could be harder to do things like get people and supplies in and out of countries to fight the outbreak. And where could this lead? If the U.S. starts banning people from other countries, the fear is they could start hiding cases.
That's NPR's health correspondent Rob Stein. Rob, thanks a lot.
You bet.
Okay, the impeachment trial of President Trump is nearing its end after senators voted against allowing witness testimony last week.
Right, so closing arguments in the impeachment trial are going to be delivered today, and there's little doubt the Senate on Wednesday will vote to acquit the president on 2 articles of impeachment. Republican Senator Lamar Alexander from Tennessee was one of his party's swing voters who announced that he will not support additional witnesses, and he explained his reasoning to our co-host Steve Inskeep on Friday.
I don't need to hear any more evidence to decide that the president did what he's charged with doing. So if you've got 8 witnesses saying that you left the scene of an accident, you don't need 9.
Now, we should say the president might not have to wait until Wednesday to proclaim exoneration, delivering his State of the Union speech tomorrow before that final Senate vote.
All right, we're going to turn now to NPR's Tim Mack. He's joining us from our studios in Washington, D.C. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
So the trial starts again today. At this point, it feels like a foregone conclusion. Explain what's going to happen next.
Well, the House impeachment managers and the president's defense team will be given 2 hours each to make closing arguments starting at 11 o'clock Eastern today. Then senators will be given until Wednesday to give speeches, and they may want to lay out the way they voted on witnesses or explain their views on the trial more broadly. On Wednesday at 4 o'clock, we expect that the Senate will vote on whether to convict or acquit the president on those 2 articles of impeachment. And because 67 votes are required to convict and remove the president, and there's no sign of a large number of Republicans turning against the president, the outcome seems all but certain.
So this is all happening as Iowa has its caucuses tonight. David and I are here in Des Moines. I mean, is there any sense at this point as to how a possible acquittal for Trump might affect the election?
Well, it will mean a couple of things. It will mean that the 4 2020 candidates in the Senate are free to return to the campaign trail, and the trial will still be ongoing, however, when the president delivers his State of the Union address on Tuesday. And it will give him a primetime stage to talk about impeachment if he wants to, and a chance, as you mentioned, to talk about what he sees as an exoneration.
Is anyone talking about what sort of precedent this is going to set for future impeachment cases?
Well, both sides have talked about that repeatedly through the trial. The president's team says that the impeachment process was brought in a partisan manner and lowers the bar for future cases of impeachment in the future. But the House impeachment managers argue that if the president is not convicted and removed, he will continue to obstruct Congress, refuse to respond to their legitimate investigations, or even may see the acquittal as a green light to continue the same kind of alleged misconduct that got the president impeached to begin with.
All right, NPR's Tim Mack, we appreciate it. Thank
We are in Des Moines, Iowa, broadcasting live from Smoky Row, a fabulous coffee shop. We are in front of a live audience of brave souls who got up very early to be here with us. Thank you so much.
We thought we were going to be talking through results of the Iowa caucuses, but we are not going to do that because for a lot of reasons that we'll get into, there are no results to talk through. The delay has given several candidates a chance to declare victory.
Well, it looks like it's going to be a long night, but I'm feeling good.
When those results are announced, I have a good feeling we're going to be doing very, very well here in Iowa.
We know there's delays, but we know one thing.
It is too close to call, so I'm just going to tell you what I do know.
We are punching above our weight.
So what in the world happened?
Well, NPR's Miles Parks is with us from Washington, D.C., and NPR senior political editor Domenico Montanaro is with us here at Smoky Row. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good morning.
Domenico, let's start off with you. This is a mess.
This is a mess.
What happened?
What happened was that they were using an app for the first time in this process, and something went wrong. That we don't know specifically what happened, but we know that a lot of people had difficulty initially downloading it, in reporting the results, and then we saw things unravel as hours went by. We didn't get results. We heard from lots of county co-chairmen and precinct captains who said that they even tried to call in the information because they couldn't get the information
Which seems
loaded.
pretty basic.
Right. But they couldn't report it through the app. They then were trying to call, and I'm certain that because of the fact that they were supposed to report it through an app this year, they didn't have as many people manning the phones, and people were left on hold like it was a radio station that they were trying to get tickets to a concert to. And some of these folks decided they were just going to go to sleep and that they'll maybe report them in the morning.
And so, Miles, what did it used to be? The system was they just bypassed an app and just went right to the phones?
Yeah, the phones were the old-fashioned way, and they basically said, well, we have the app this time. It's optional. We think it's going to work really well. They actually said that they thought, and this is kind of hard to believe now, that results were going to come in a lot earlier than in previous years, that we might have results by 9 or 10 p.m. Eastern time. I think people who monitor elections for a living were very skeptical of that claim right when they were putting that out there, but they really thought that this app meant that results were going to come in quickly.
Huh.
Domenico, what does this mean for the candidates? I mean, they had all planned, okay, get results from Iowa, move on to New Hampshire, keep going, sort of with the context being what happened in Iowa. There's no official context yet for this campaign to move forward.
This is completely deflating for whoever winds up being the actual winner here in Iowa, because think about what's going to happen later today. We've got the president delivering the State of the Union address. On Wednesday, there's supposed to be the impeachment vote. So when is this person who won going to be able to capture that momentum that they were supposed to have?
Which is the whole point.
That's exactly right, because the number of delegates that are selected here represent just about 1% of the overall pledged delegate count. So it's not really about delegates, even though it's about delegates for who wins. That, this was really about momentum. And you have the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. You have a debate on Friday. And this really robs whoever was going to win the caucuses here of that much-needed momentum, the winnowing of that field, and it just throws things all up in the air in a place where the candidates spent $50 million in ads to try to win here over a year. This is a complete disaster and a mess for the Iowa Democratic Party and for the party going forward.
Also really disheartening just for the people who showed up to have their voices heard, right? Like
Absolutely.
David and I were both at caucuses last night. The caucus that I went to, at least, it was running hours behind. We, in fact, had to leave because we had to put on a show in a mere hours. And so we didn't even stay long enough to see the results. But people take this really seriously in Iowa. And so I'm sure people are waking up this morning. You guys in the audience, how many of you caucused last night? Oh, everybody caucused last night.
Does it feel empty not knowing what happened? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So do we know at this point when the results are coming in? Do we have a time?
The Iowa Democratic Party says that they, quote unquote, expect results sometime Tuesday. So, they're checking every piece of paper. Luckily, they had a paper backup this year for the first time. They'll be able to go over each of the results. But remember, we're talking about almost 1,700 caucus sites. That's a lot of paper to go through and a lot of places where they're going to have to check and recheck. And it was already going to be complicated because they were releasing 3 different kinds of results: the results for the first alignment, then after that second alignment, and then the estimated number of delegates. Already it was going to be confusing. Already it was going to be something we were going to have to explain and walk people through. And now, who knows how this is going to be sifted through.
Miles, I want to go back to you. You were actually the first to report last month on the state Democratic Party's decision to use this smartphone app to transmit results in this year's caucuses. I mean, how did party officials justify this decision, despite what you brought up, some questions about security and usability, which seem important to talk about this morning?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. They didn't really, honestly. We asked all of these questions, and basically what they said was that we were basically kind of overblowing these issues, that everything would be fine, that they were testing it, and everything would work great. I was really curious about whether this was just a public-facing thing to the media or whether this was the same impression that some of these precinct leaders got. I actually talked to a precinct leader named Tom Courtney, who was leading a precinct in Des Moines County, and I asked him whether he felt like the Democratic State Party was really considering the worst-case scenarios around this app.
I thought it got glossed over. They made it seem like this was going to work fine. They tested it, and it was going to work fine. I'm old enough. I was skeptical of the whole thing, but I thought it would be better than it is.
Courtney actually went home before he was able to send in his results to the state party. He went home, left the empty cafeteria, said he was on hold for over 45 minutes, gave up, and said he was just going to try again, calling again in the morning.
But you had reported on these problems, Miles, way back in the day, so you get to say, I told you so.
It doesn't feel good, Rachel, I promise. I would much prefer to have some results to talk about.
Right.
Domenico, do you think the party's going to have to make changes? And what could this mean for Iowa as the first state to hold a contest?
I think this, it doesn't help. It doesn't help Iowa in the sense that there's already been a lot of pushback based on the lack of representation, the fact that it's over 90% white in the caucuses, that it doesn't look like the rest of the country, it doesn't look like the Democratic Party. There's already been a faction of people within the Democratic Party who have wanted to move Iowa off its first in the nation status as the first caucuses, that this is going to become a huge issue within the Democratic Party. You can bet there are going to be a whole lot more reporters at the next Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting of the Democratic National Committee, something that's usually pretty tame, and I guarantee there's going to be a whole lot of conversation about what to do 4 years from now.
And a whole lot of scrutiny.
It's only February.
Yeah.
It's only February.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro here in Des Moines and NPR's Miles Parks in Washington, D.C. Thanks to you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we have more grim numbers to report on the coronavirus. Nearly a third of the more than 20,000 cases worldwide are in just one Chinese city, Wuhan.
The city has been under quarantine since January 23rd to prevent the outbreak from spreading even further than it has. The quarantine has also put an enormous strain on hospitals in Wuhan, trying to screen and treat patients coming in there. Wuhan is close to finishing construction on 2 new treatment centers. But many people diagnosed with the coronavirus say they are still waiting for medical care. At least 420 people have died from the virus.
And let's go to NPR's Emily Fang in Beijing. And Emily, how desperate does it feel in Wuhan for people there right now if some of them are not getting medical care?
In Wuhan, the system seems to have broken down completely. There simply just aren't enough hospital beds and doctors to treat everyone. I managed to speak to 12 people in Wuhan today. Either they or themselves have been diagnosed with this coronavirus, and they're still waiting for proper medical care. Instead, they're being sent now to these makeshift isolation wards, which are basically repurposed hotel rooms or clinics. I was able to talk to one of the patients diagnosed in one of these clinics. Her name is Liu Xiaohong. She actually couldn't really breathe very well, so we're not playing the audio, but she said she's not getting any medical care. Someone just comes by during the morning and night to take her temperature. All she wants right now is a hospital bed.
I mean, just the idea of being sort of set apart from everyone else, alone and incredibly sick like that. I mean, how did we get here? Why are the resources so scarce in this part of China?
The first is screening. People have been waiting overnight to get these coronavirus kits, and they're not allowed to be admitted into a hospital until they're confirmed as a coronavirus patient. The other is paralyzed bureaucracy. Take the case of this woman named Pang Yifei that I talked to. Her grandmother died of a pneumonia-like illness on January 25th, but she's not sure it was coronavirus because she passed away so suddenly. Now her father has been diagnosed with the virus, but she's been calling up everyone. She even called the Wuhan city mayor, asking for help.
这个态度也让我们老百姓很心寒的，真的太心寒了。
She's saying the attitude of these officials towards us common people is just so disappointing. Several officials said they didn't know who we should contact. Our community representatives told us to contact the Health Commission. The Health Commission then told us to contact our community representatives. So given this totally circular logic, a lot of people have had to make the heartbreaking choice of taking care of their own relatives at home. One of these people is Pearl Tan. She is only 23 years old. Both her parents have come down and been diagnosed with the coronavirus, and she's now desperately trying to get them care at home. She's saying she has to rely on herself. No one else is going to do it. She's terrified right now. Everyone is scared, but she's got to be there for her parents.
Is there any hope? I mean, I know we're seeing all these new cases. Any hope that maybe just the quarantine on Wuhan could be lifted at some point?
Parts of it are going to be lifted by next Friday, February 14th. That's when Hubei province, which is where Wuhan is the capital, is supposed to let people to start going back to work. And authorities said that people in Wuhan who have to leave for work are going to be allowed to. So we shall see whether people will be able to leave and whether that will make the conditions in Wuhan better or worse.
NPR's Emily Fang in Beijing talking about the spread of the coronavirus in a particularly desperate situation in one Chinese city. Emily, thanks for your
We still don't have the final results of the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah, technical problems delayed the numbers, although most precincts have now reported their results. And for now, Pete Buttigieg is emerging as a winner on delegate counts with a narrow lead over Bernie Sanders. Both candidates claimed victory, each in his own way.
I'm very proud to tell you that last night in Iowa, we received more votes on the first and second round than any other candidate.
A campaign that some said should have no business even making this attempt has taken its place at the front of this race to replace the current president with a better vision for the future.
Okay, multiple ways of counting the results gave multiple opportunities to claim victory, but there's no doubt who lost the Iowa caucuses itself. Iowa's Democratic Party blamed a coding error for the lack of timely results. So where does the Democratic race stand now that we have some vote totals?
NPR national political correspondent Mara Liasson joins us with some answers. Good morning, Mara.
Hi, Noelle.
Okay, so let's get into the numbers. With 71% of precincts reporting, Buttigieg has a narrow lead over Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren is in third. What does it mean to be in the top three at this point?
Well, it means that the race is still not winnowed. All three of them can claim they got a ticket out of Iowa for Pete Buttigieg, he seems to be on track to win the largest number of delegates, which is bragging rights for him. Bernie Sanders won the equivalent of the popular vote. He had come very, very close to Hillary Clinton, remember, in 2016, so he had a very good showing. But he didn't get the turnout surge that he's been promising he could create for the Democratic Party. Turnout in Iowa equaled 2016 levels, around 170,000 Democrats voting, rather than the big numbers, 240,000 in 2008. So Warren's still in the game. She had faded a little in the polls, but her good organization that she'd invested a lot in paid off for her. So she's still in the hunt, too.
Is Joe Biden still in the game? He appears to be in fourth place, which is not what he wanted. Is he still in it?
This is a very disappointing finish for Joe Biden. He didn't even surpass the very low expectations that his campaign had laid out publicly. They said that he, being even in third place, would be fine. Other Biden supporters said he really had to come in a close second in order to be able to raise the money to keep on going. He now is facing the next primary, New Hampshire, which is really Bernie Sanders' territory. Yeah. Sanders won it by a curvature of the earth last time in 2016. He's from a neighboring state of Vermont, of course. And Biden has to hope that his firewall in South Carolina, when he finally gets to a state where there are a lot of African-American voters, where he's very strong, he has to hope that that holds.
We're hearing, Mara, that with Biden not doing so well, there's an opening now for Michael Bloomberg. Why would he be the person in a position to capitalize on Biden stumbling?
Because Biden was supposed to be the leader of the centrist lane. We think that Bernie Sanders is now the leader of the left-wing lane in the party. The rationale for Bloomberg getting in was that Biden looked so weak. Last night, he spoke to a big rally in Philadelphia.
I think the results from Iowa underscore that we need a candidate who can build a coalition broad enough to unite the party and strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and beat him.
Bloomberg has already spent almost $300 million on advertising, and he is having a staffing surge. He just hired 2,000 people.
Okay, 2,000 people. Wow. NPR national political correspondent Mara Liasson. Thanks, Mara.
Thank you.
President Trump used his State of the Union address last night to make the case that he should be reelected.
Speaking to a joint session of Congress last night, the president claimed credit for a, quote, great American comeback.
3 years ago, we launched the Great American Comeback. Tonight, I stand before you to share the incredible results. Jobs are booming, incomes are soaring, poverty is plummeting, crime is falling, confidence is surging, and our country is thriving and highly respected again.
The president never once mentioned the impeachment inquiry during his 78-minute speech, which took place on the eve of a Senate vote that is expected to leave him in office. The speech also featured several moments that could remind viewers of the president's past as a reality TV star.
NPR political reporter Tim Mack is with us in studio. Hey, Tim.
Hey, good morning.
All right, so you were watching. How would you characterize the speech?
Well, it was a polarizing speech, a partisan speech that started off without even the customary shows of perfunctory respect. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered to shake President Trump's hand before the speech. He declined. And unlike in previous State of the Unions, where a speaker typically says that they have the, quote, high privilege and distinct honor of presenting the president, the speaker omitted that. In another surprise moment, the president awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, typically awarded to civilians of universal acclaim, to controversial conservative talk radio host Rush Limbaugh during the speech. And the speech itself was filled with jabs against Democrats, accusing many of the lawmakers in the room, for example, of endorsing a, quote, socialist takeover of the healthcare system. And to wrap it all up, after the speech was over, Pelosi took her copy of the speech and tore it up.
Between the accusations of socialism and Nancy Pelosi tearing that speech up, which was remarkable, what does that actually mean in terms of the legislative agenda as we go into this election year?
Well, the president and the speaker and their respective parties obviously aren't in the mood to work together. One example, the president called for legislation to lower prescription drug prices. That's something that the late Congressman Elijah Cummings had wanted to work with the White House on, but there wasn't much engagement, and the Democrats passed their own bill in the House earlier in this Congress. So they're talking about similar things, but they're not cooperating on doing it. You'll remember in last year's State of the Union address, the president said if there's going to be legislation, there cannot be investigation, and he meant that. We've had many investigations since.
He did not mention impeachment.
That's right. Despite an opportunity to do so, he didn't bring it up during his speech.
And the trial will end today. The impeachment trial will end today. Senators are going to vote on the two articles. We're expecting them to acquit the president. How is this going to work?
Well, there are two scheduled votes at 4 p.m. Eastern today on the two articles of impeachment. The question now is merely how many senators will vote to convict and remove the president. It's unclear whether any Democrats from conservative states will join Republicans to acquit the president. And Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski have announced they will vote to acquit. So one other remaining question is among Republicans whether Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney could be the sole GOP member of the Senate voting to convict.
NPR's Tim Mak. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks a lot.
People who graduated from historically Black or predominantly Hispanic colleges might be paying more to borrow money because of where they went to school.
Wow, that's according to a new report from a financial watchdog group. This report found that one firm called Upstart is charging higher interest rates to graduates of historically Black and majority Hispanic colleges. Upstart's CEO, Dave Gerard, denied it.
I mean, we're a company that our entire mission, the reason we get out of bed every morning is to improve access to affordable credit. So we are absolutely supportive of the intent that credit shouldn't be biased or unfair in any way.
Still, the report's results raised eyebrows of some legal experts.
NPR's Chris Arnold was the first person to get a look at the watchdog report. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Noelle.
Tell me about this watchdog.
Well, the report comes from a group it's a nonprofit. It's called the Student Borrower Protection Center. In this case, most what they're looking at is not student loans. It goes beyond that. And a lot of Americans are getting loans now from a new breed of lenders. They're called fintechs or financial technology firms. And what they do is they use all kinds of data, so they don't just look at your credit score. They look at all kinds of different things. And some consider, well, where did you go to college? What did you major in? We're going to consider this stuff too. That got this nonprofit group concerned, this advocacy group, and they're wondering, well, okay, how is this really affecting lending decisions, how I went to, or where I went to school, and is that fair?
Well, how did they end up coming to the conclusion that people who graduated from historically Black or majority Hispanic colleges might be paying higher interest on their loans?
All right, so what they did is they did a test, and they chose Upstart, which is one of these fintech lenders, and its website allows you to apply for loans pretty easily. So that was one reason. They've also talked about using education as a factor, and they applied for dozens of loans, sort of posing as the same guy, makes $50,000 a year, an analyst, all these different details, everything the same, except each time they apply for a loan, one time they say, hey, I go to NYU in New York, lots of different universities. And one time they said, well, I go to Howard University, which, of course, is one of the most famous historically Black colleges and university in this country. And then they compared and they found, well, if you go to NYU versus Howard for a $30,000 personal loan in a 5-year term, $3,500 more in interest you end up paying if you went to Howard University, a historically Black college. This is Kate Welbeck. She's a lawyer following civil rights issues with the group.
There's no other difference between these two borrowers other than the fact that one attended NYU and one attended Howard. And so there's no other explanation that we can really come to terms with other than the fact that where this borrower went to school mattered in terms of how Upstart measured their creditworthiness.
And they found this at other schools, too, with large Hispanic populations. And so they wrote this report saying this is educational redlining, or at least it looks like that.
And what are legal experts saying?
Depends on who you talk to. But look, I think a lot of them are saying, no, nobody's doing this intentionally. But this is an issue worth being concerned about, because when you bring in all these other factors, all these other pieces of data, they can have unintentional biases. And we have to be very, very careful, and we should be keeping an eye on this.
And you did talk to the CEO of Upstart. You asked him, are you discriminating? He said no, right?
He said absolutely not. They run tests, they do all kinds of things. But he said, look, he's open to talking with the group because he, too, said this is an important issue.
Okay, NPR's Chris Arnold. Thanks so much.
Although the result was never in doubt, you could feel the weight of history as senators cast their votes yesterday.
It is, therefore, ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
The Senate acquitted the president on both articles of impeachment, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The vote was almost entirely along partisan lines, but the vote of one senator who said he was guided by the facts and by his faith made it harder to dismiss as just a partisan proceeding.
NPR congressional correspondent Susan Davis has been covering this impeachment drama and is in our studio. Sue, good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Who was the one senator?
Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney, a familiar name, the 2012 nominee for president for the Republican Party. And he gave a very emotional speech on the floor. At times he seemed to get choked up with tears, in which he explained that he just simply couldn't vote to acquit the president.
Were I to ignore the evidence that has been presented and disregard what I believe my oath and the Constitution demands of me for the sake of a partisan end, it would, I fear, expose my character to history's rebuke and the censure of my own conscience.
It was a politically courageous vote because Mitt Romney will get no awards for this. This will not be rewarded in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it's brought on a ton of attacks already, including from the president himself, and some calls to expel him from the party. Although Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was asked about that yesterday, and he quite literally laughed it off.
Yeah, you have to assume that there would be some Republicans who would make the opposite calculation, that my vote here, it would not make any difference anyway, and therefore I should just vote to acquit the president. That would be the easier thing to do.
It was never going to affect the outcome, which we knew from the beginning, is that the president was going to be acquitted.
And yet he made this statement. Now, there were some Democrats. It would be easy for most Democrats to vote for conviction, but weren't there some Democrats who faced a difficult vote of their own?
Yeah, I mean, there are political consequences for the senators who cast this vote, especially for the ones that are also on the ballot this year. And the one that took another politically risky vote is Doug Jones of Alabama. He's a Democrat in a ruby red state, maybe one of the states where Donald Trump is his most popular. And there was a question whether he would vote to acquit, because that is more aligned with his constituents' home state. So obviously voting to convict is something that I'm sure that Republicans are going to use against Doug Jones, who's probably the most vulnerable incumbent in the Senate.
I'm also thinking about Democrats such as Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who spoke at one point during this week of going for censure of the president, which sounded like he was going to vote maybe for acquittal, but he voted for conviction, right?
He did. And he and another Democrat, Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, also comes from a state where the president is more popular. But they're Democrats who have the luxury of not being up for re-election in 2020 and have a little bit more runway to explain this vote to their constituents.
So the next question, Sue Davis, is how the president responds. People have been asking, will he quiet down, calm down? Will he feel unleashed because Congress went after him with the biggest weapon they could and did not get him? What happens to the president now?
Well, I think if you watch the State of the Union address, it's safe to say that the president's feeling pretty confident right now. He's expected to give remarks this afternoon in what the White House is billing as a victory speech. Although it's important to remember that while he was acquitted, the judgment on him from Republican senators was far more mixed. There was, I believe 8 to 10 Republicans who said what the president did was wrong, was inappropriate. And even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has never answered the question when asked if what he thinks the president did was wrong. At a press conference yesterday, reporters tried 3 times to get McConnell to say, is it wrong for a president to solicit intervention in an election? And he simply wouldn't answer the question.
Which means he's also not saying that it's right, I suppose we should mention.
Exactly. But the judgment on the president is still very mixed.
Sue, thanks for the update. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's NPR congressional correspondent Susan Davis. One of these days, we will learn the final results of Monday's Iowa caucus.
Yeah, there's still no clear winner in Monday's voting, even though around 97% of the results have been released. This whole delay started with a failure of technology.
NPR's Miles Parks is taking up residence in Des Moines until this crisis is over. Miles, good morning.
Good morning.
I hope that's not literally true that you're going to take up residence there, but what are the latest results?
So this race just continues to tighten as we've gotten more and more results over the past 24 hours. Former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Bernie Sanders are now essentially tied in state delegate equivalents, with Buttigieg ahead by about 1/10 of a percentage point. But what's interesting is Sanders has actually got a more sizable lead in the raw vote total. He's up by about 2,500 votes, and that lead has continued to grow as more of the vote count has been coming in over the last few hours.
I guess we should note that's like the difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote. That's a rough equivalent to what you're talking about in this hunt for delegates. But it sounds like they're more or less tied, both near the top, which means Elizabeth Warren is farther back, Joe Biden is farther back, the other candidates are very far back. That seems to be the result that the candidates take into New Hampshire. Now, what about the actual meltdown itself, the failure of technology? Is more information coming out about that?
So we know it comes back to some sort of coding error within the reporting app that precinct leaders were using on Monday night. And it's meant the party has needed to go through this week all of the paper records that caucus goers filled out when they arrived on Monday. You can just imagine how labor-intensive that process is.
Yeah.
I talked to Michelle Smith, who's the chair of the Jasper County Democrats. She also led a precinct. She told me how deflating this whole thing has been, specifically because her individual precinct actually went really smoothly on Monday.
I was excited, like, we're not going to be here forever. And then it went downhill from there.
She realized there was going to be a problem on Monday when one of her friends, who was also leading another precinct, was bragging to her, saying she used the app. It went so quickly. Come join us at the bar. We're already done caucusing. And then the state party calls Michelle, because she's the county chair, and asks for her friend's results again. She's like, uh-oh. And you can kind of imagine that same reaction happening at 1,700 different precincts across the state at different times Monday night.
Okay, so I just got to mention, Miles, I don't want to embarrass you or anything, but as this debacle unfolded, people began on Twitter sharing a story by one Miles Parks, along with Iowa Public Radio's Kate Payne, stories about problems with this app before the Iowa caucuses. Why didn't they listen to you?
Well, we were talking about all the potential issues. I can't say with 100% certainty that I knew this was going to happen. We just said a lot of experts had a lot of questions, and those questions weren't being answered, and they're still not really being answered. State Democratic Chair Troy Price answered a few questions on Tuesday about some of the technology, but he gave no timetable for the final results. He also repeated this comment that top cyber experts, nationally renowned cyber experts, had looked at the app, but he has given no indication about who those cyber experts were, what companies they worked for. And just yesterday, a report came out from ProPublica that a cybersecurity firm they contracted with took a look at the app and found major security vulnerabilities, basically saying this could have been hacked.
Okay. Miles, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you, Steve.
That's NPR's Miles Parks, still in Des Moines. Very pleasant place to be. Okay, for more than a year now, the White House has been looking for ways to push Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro out of power.
And yet they have not found one. But then this week, President Trump invited Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaidó to his State of the Union address.
Please take this message back that all Americans are united with the Venezuelan people in their righteous struggle for freedom. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Guaidó was also at the White House yesterday.
NPR White House correspondent Franco Ordonez is covering this story. He's in our studios. Good morning, sir.
Hello, Steve.
So how is the president trying to support Venezuela's, I guess they would say acting president is the way the United States recognizes him?
Correct.
Right?
Interim president.
Interim president.
He's, President Trump is trying to show that Venezuela is still a priority, even though it hasn't been as much in the headlines, kind of to give Guaidó a boost as he seeks to unseat Maduro. I mean, you'll remember a year ago, Guaidó inspired these massive demonstrations and hoped that he could lead an uprising, but those hopes kind of dwindled a bit. So when Guaidó stood up during the State of the Union, you just played the clip, it really sent a message. It was a rare moment when both Republicans and Democrats stood and clapped. And Guaidó's still here. He's making the rounds today, meeting with the USAID administrator and congressional leaders.
Does the symbolism of this appearance matter?
The symbolism does matter. There have been accusations from current and former U.S. officials that President Trump was pulling away from Guaidó. The White House says that's not true. A senior administration official told reporters that they still have a list of ways to increase the pressure on Maduro. That official said that Trump has authorized new measures to be taken in the next 30 days. He didn't give details, but I will say, I talked to Fernando Coots. He's a former White House official who helped draft a roadmap of economic sanctions for Maduro. He had this to say.
I would say that realistically speaking, when you're thinking about options that will make an actual impact that aren't symbolic, the United States has used the vast majority of its options in the economic realm. And of course, again, you could go into the military realm, but that is not something that I think is seriously being considered.
I can tell you one strategy that the White House says it is not considering, and that is negotiating with Maduro himself unless it's for his departure.
What the U.S. seems mainly to have then is economic pressure to apply in Venezuela. And I'm just thinking economic pressure has not yet overturned the government in Iran or North Korea, just to give a couple of other examples. Does the White House have any other tools at its disposal?
Right. Experts say sanctions can be effective at pushing countries to change their behavior, but it's not the best at leading to new leadership. I will say, Trump is motivated to keep the pressure up regardless. Look, it's an election year. This is a very important issue for many Venezuelan and Cuban expats, particularly in South Florida. Florida is a key swing state, but it is unclear how they're going to do this beyond taking the symbolic steps. One option is against countries that still back Maduro. Robert O'Brien, he's the national security advisor. He basically told Russia and other supporters that they just need to knock it off.
Franco, thanks for the update.
Thank you.
That's NPR.
Tonight, 7 Democratic candidates take the debate stage in New Hampshire ahead of the first primary contest of the 2020 race.
That's right, but it's happening as their party deals with the debacle of the first caucus. All the results are finally in from Iowa, and there's no decisive winner. So what could that mean for tonight's debate?
We're joined by NPR political correspondent Asma Khalid, who's going to tell us all the answers, right, Asma?
You wish.
Right, because answers are not something that has now become, a part of this presidential contest. There was so much drama with the Iowa results. Let's start there. Just tell us what the latest is.
So the latest, Rachel, is that we now have 100% of precinct results. So that means we have the entire set of results that we've been waiting for. I think what's the most astounding thing, though, to me, is that the Associated Press is saying it cannot call a winner, that this is just really tight margins between the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, in addition to the irregularities in this year's caucus process, that it just doesn't think it's possible to determine a winner at this point. So that's where we are.
Wow. So how are the candidates responding? I mean, we saw this kind of vacuum of information that they tried to fill initially. Now that there is this result, this tie essentially, what's the word from the candidates?
Well, so both Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders have essentially declared victory. I got an email from Pete Buttigieg's campaign. The subject line reads, "We officially won the Iowa caucuses." I also got one then from Bernie Sanders' campaign saying how they're celebrating winning the popular vote. And so that's essentially what's happening. Sanders did have a pretty clear victory when we look at the popular vote. This, of course, isn't exactly how delegates are differentiated and determined, doled out there in Iowa.
Right, and I've never heard of anyone delineating the popular vote in the Iowa caucuses before.
Yeah, and part of this is because we didn't really always have the specific raw vote totals. This was something that the party brought about in part because of concerns from Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016. His campaign is now saying that not using the popular vote is just kind of an outdated, arcane model. And I would argue this is probably something both the Iowa Democratic Party and the DNC is going to have to look into moving forward. But beyond the two of them, we have Elizabeth Warren, the Massachusetts senator who has been trying to reassure her voters. She came in third place. She's been trying to pitch herself as a unity candidate who could bring the party back together. And then perhaps most striking, Joe Biden has really flatly called Iowa a gut punch. And I was with him both in Iowa on that night and then as he flew into Manchester. And it was just, to me, remarkable with how they were originally describing Iowa as being a good night. And as we've seen results come out, it's pretty clear that it was not a good night for the former vice president.
So looking ahead to the New Hampshire primary, what, if anything, do the complicated Iowa results tell you about what we can expect in New Hampshire?
So it really reveals a pretty striking divide within the Democratic Party, largely along progressive and moderate lines. And many people thought that the moderate candidate in that situation would have been the former Vice President Joe Biden. But a fourth-place finish for him in Iowa, to be blunt, is not where a lot of folks think a frontrunner should be. So there are certainly very high expectations for Joe Biden to do well in New Hampshire. I will say that could be tough. Bernie Sanders leads in the polls. He's from neighboring Vermont, and New Hampshire is really the state that launched him in 2016. He beat Hillary Clinton there by more than 20 points. Earlier this cycle, I talked to a lot of New Hampshire progressives. People told me they weren't sure if he should run again, but it seems like a lot of them have come around. Let's take a listen to one guy. His name is Burt Cohen.
No matter who the nominee is, he is going to viciously call them, him or her, a socialist. And I was thinking, if when they hear that word, they scatter like roaches when you turn the light on, that's not going to work. Bernie will stand and go on offense.
And so, Rachel, he's describing the fact that he feels like the Republicans, President Trump, is going to call any candidate a socialist.
Right.
And as he began to think about that, he's like, really, he said, that Bernie Sanders was the only one who would be able to stand up to those sorts of attacks.
And tonight, Asma, I imagine we're going to see more pressure on Pete Buttigieg than we have seen before.
I would say so.
Right.
Really, he has not been in the spotlight so far so much. But the question I do have is that fundamentally, debates this campaign cycle have not changed the trajectory.
Okay. NPR's Asma Khalid for us. Thank you, Asma.
Happy to do it.
The Wuhan doctor who tried to get the Chinese government to understand the grave threat of the coronavirus has himself died from the disease.
And his death has left a lot of people in China grieving and furious about how the Chinese government tried to silence him. The virus, meanwhile, is still spreading. China's state broadcaster is reporting that 2 newborn babies were infected yesterday. They're the youngest cases so far. So China's trying to build more than 20 mass quarantine centers, mostly in Wuhan. And officials are asking family members to report each other for quarantine if they're showing symptoms. At this point, there are more than 31,000 confirmed cases just in China.
All right, we've got NPR's Emily Fang on the line from Beijing. Emily, let's start with these quarantine centers. Who's being sent there?
They're for people with mild symptoms of the virus, and they don't have much choice about going. Yesterday, China's vice premier said Wuhan was in a, quote, state of war, so officials needed to go door to door and inspect people to make sure that they were reporting symptoms and would get sent to quarantine. These quarantine centers are gyms, they're stadiums that have a couple hundred beds shoved into them, and the reason why China needs them is because hospitals are just overflowing.
So, how are people responding? Are these measures welcome? Are they starting to volunteer themselves or family members for quarantine?
It's a mixed bag. The concern is what kind of care their family members are going to get in these wards. I talked to this woman in Wuhan named Pang Yifei earlier this week because she'd been trying to get 3 family members with the virus into hospitals unsuccessfully. So I asked her today, would she consider these quarantine wards? Here's what she said. She's saying, I have to admit the conditions in these wards are all right. They give you food, they take your temperature, but I would not call these quarantine wards. They are where you put people so they can die. Wow. So local officials are pushing her to send her family members there. She is refused. Other people are so desperate, though, that they'll take any care they can get. And one of these people is Dong Bo, also from Wuhan. His sister, Dong Dan, has been diagnosed. She needs dialysis, though, for a pre-existing condition, and no clinic will take an infected person. So he's trying to get her into a ward, but here's what he said when I called him earlier. He's saying, I'm helpless. We're at the end of the road. I can't bear to watch as all my loved ones die, one by one. I have to do everything I can to save them. His father, I should mention, had already died from a mysterious pneumonia disease. Right now, his local officials have stopped answering his calls. No one will tell him how to get into a ward, and that suggests there are actually not enough room in the quarantine centers now.
Wow. So more than 630 people have died so far. One of them was this doctor who tried to warn the government about the severity of the coronavirus. The government basically ignored him. Now he himself has died. Is that going to have any effect on how the Chinese government responds moving forward?
People have been unanimous in their tribute, but it sparked the next stage, which is total censorship. All tributes to him that are critical of the party, of the government, have been censored today online.
Wow. NPR's Emily Fang from Beijing. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, we want to give you just a heads up about our last story today. It contains allegations of abuse of minors, and it might be uncomfortable for some listeners. A former high-ranking official at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee says he was fired last year for raising concerns about the issue of abuse of Olympic athletes.
Dr. Bill Moreau filed a whistleblower lawsuit this week. He says the organization isn't doing enough to keep athletes safe, even though it's been more than 3 years since that sexual abuse scandal involving Olympic gymnastics gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar.
NPR sports correspondent Tom Goldman has been following on all this and joins us this morning. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Rachel.
Just give us a little background. Who is Bill Moreau?
Bill Moreau is the former vice president of sports medicine at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, USOPC, and he served in that role for 10 years until he was fired last May. Now, in his position, he didn't treat patients. He says he got athlete patients in front of the right doctors. He also helped oversee Olympic sports medicine operations at Olympic Games, Pan Am Games, big international events like that.
Okay, so why does he say he was fired?
Well, he says because of his whistleblowing. Over the past couple of years, at least, Moreau repeatedly spoke up about what he alleged to be wrongdoing. It was especially important in his mind because the USOPC, as you know, came under fire after the Larry Nassar scandal broke,
Right.
for not doing enough to protect athletes. And Moreau says there was still bad stuff going on, even after all the scrutiny and calls for change. His lawsuit, which he calls a whistleblower retaliation suit, details several instances, including a case of statutory rape involving a 15-year-old female Paralympic athlete that Moreau says the USOPC didn't initially consider a crime, an incident when a male Olympic coach was discovered naked in a sauna that was in a public space at a USOPC training center. A Team USA under-18 female gymnastics team was in the building at the same time, and the coach was only verbally reprimanded. Moreau said he was amazed the coach wasn't fired, considering, how we're in this period with Olympic sports where any hint of sexual abuse or impropriety is supposed to be treated very seriously.
So what does Moreau want out of this lawsuit?
A jury trial, damages. He wants the USOPC to change. He wants the USOPC to have tougher rules and exert more control over the individual national governing bodies that it oversees. So the rules trickle down to those NGBs and to the clubs below them and to the tens of millions of athletes and coaches who aren't in the spotlight, but where bad things can and do happen. He also wants the lawsuit to bring light to what he tried to do. Here he is.
If another kid is raped, or another athlete takes their life, and I didn't go to the mat and do everything I could to force change, that's something I'd have to live with the rest of my life.
Rachel, the USOPC so far has only released a statement about the lawsuit saying, in part, we regret that Dr. Moreau and his attorney have misrepresented the causes of his separation from the USOPC. We will honor their decision to see this matter through in the courts.
All right, NPR's Tom Goldman for us on that story. Thank